If you're anything like me, you have found yourself really stuck when needing to have that hard conversation. You know that it's going to take that conversation for your people to do what you need them to do or see something that they need to grow in. But on the other hand, it just really sucks to have these hard conversations. You go to sleep the night before and you got that pit in your stomach, you're just dreading it, afraid of what the person might think or feel worried about conflict that this conversation might cause. And on top of all of that, you're thinking, how do I even start the conversation? We have all been there as leaders, and I know it's no fun. But, friend, I have good news, and that is that this is something that can get easier for you and that you can get better at. And today, I'm going to share with you my simple framework that I guarantee will make hard conversations not so hard anymore. Now, there can be a lot of different kinds of hard conversations, but today, specifically, I'm going to be talking about giving hard feedback conversations. So, I think it's important to clarify that feedback is any way that we gather information about ourselves. So, if I'm cooking dinner for my family and my son responds with a happy sound, then that's feedback. If my daughter replies with a disgusted sound as she takes a bite of her meal, that gives me feedback all on how I did cooking dinner that night. Or let's say I'm walking through the store and someone says, "Hey, I love that dress." It's all feedback and it can be formal, it can be informal. So I grew up dancing. I started dancing when I was 3 years old. I was like a little ballerina tap dancer. And since then, I haven't stopped really. I've been dancing and teaching and performing ever since. And when you are learning to dance or when you're learning really any skill, it's critical that you have feedback. I mean, that's the whole reason you're taking a class or a lesson is so someone else can help you improve on your skills. And the only way that happens is by someone else seeing what you're doing and then making corrections. And sometimes it's big corrections, but most often really it's small corrections, right? And it's that consistency in giving those small corrections, that information about yourself that you can't see yourself that makes all of the difference. And I mean, this is not new information for you. This is how training works. This is how getting better at anything works. And it's just what you expect. So, why is it so hard in our work context? Don't we, as leaders, want our people to get better? Don't we want to help them see the things that they can't see? And while I would love to assume that all of your employees are just showing up, wanting to learn and get better, it isn't always that simple because we are really complex as humans. Simon Sinek always says that it doesn't take much for cats to be cats together and to play well and to interact, right? They're just cats. They just do it. It doesn't take much work for them. But for us, complex adults, it is much harder. And I'm sure you have felt this on both sides. I know I have. You've felt the sting of feedback that was true, but still really hard to hear. And you have felt confusion of feedback that you didn't agree with. So, in one of my favorite books, it's called Thanks for the Feedback, the authors recognize that most people who receive feedback feel that the giver isn't good at giving it. And then the people that are giving feedback feel like the receivers aren't good at receiving it. We are complicated and this is hard. Why specifically is it hard? I'm going to guess that your answer to that question is going to be similar to mine and to many others. And that is that giving and receiving feedback is hard because we struggle to separate the feedback and our emotions. When we come to the point where we need to have a hard conversation, like when we finally bring ourselves to do it with a team member, we're typically frustrated or exhausted or confused or disappointed with what they're doing or what they're not doing. And so we tend to lead with what their behavior is doing to us, right? Like how it makes us feel is what leads us into that conversations. So, how do we go into these conversations well prepared and rightly emotional? And I say rightly emotional because we're human. We aren't robots. Our emotional connection is actually what makes feedback work, but we have to do it rightly. Well, the three-part framework that I'm about to teach you Total game changer. This is the method that I use day in and day out. And I promise you, if you put these simple habits into practice with your feedback conversations, you'll stop seeing them as hard conversations. And feedback will become something that you just do instead of something that you dread. Does that sound good? Okay. The first part of the framework is see clearly. So, this is the mindset part. And we rarely take the time to do this. So, see what clearly, you wonder. Let's start with see them clearly, see your employee clearly. So, we go into every feedback conversation telling ourselves a story about the other person. And this includes assumptions about their motives, about their intentions, about their work ethic, or whatever it is you're assuming about the other person. There is a story that we tell ourselves about them. And you could be right. But most often, there are other things that could be true that we just haven't even considered. And I use this illustration all the time, but there's always an imaginary sphere between you and the person that you're talking with. And you go in seeing your side of the sphere and assuming that you know what their side looks like. But, friend, you cannot see all sides of the sphere at the same time. You can only see your side. And the rest, their side, unless they have explicitly told you what it looks like, it is just the story you're telling yourself. So the first step is to consider what else could be true here. So here's an example. Maybe you have an employee who tends to dominate conversation in staff meetings. And the story you are telling yourself, like consciously or subconsciously, is he's so vocal and opinionated in the meeting, he just thinks he knows more than the rest of us. That's the story you're telling yourself. So what else could be true? Maybe he talks a lot because he's nervous people won't listen if he doesn't. And he's not trying to be the smartest, he just wants to feel heard. So here's another example. You have a team member who tends to slide in their work right at the deadline. And the story you're telling yourself might be, they always turn in things at the last minute. I wish they cared about the details. I wish they just cared more. But what else could be true? Maybe they actually do really care, but they have a hard time getting started and they're not trying to be late. They just need help learning how to manage their time better. It isn't your job to spend all your time guessing what else could be true, but it is your job to consider that something else besides the story you're telling yourself about them could be true. You have to be open to the possibility. So you may have heard of the fundamental attribution error, and this is where we observe a behavior and we attribute it to a character flaw. So the work comes in late, it means they don't care. They talk too much, it means they're arrogant. We attribute what we see to a character flaw. And this is where we get into trouble with feedback because we tend to address the character flaw instead of the actual behavior we're seeing. Stop making assumptions. You might be right, but you also might be wrong. So let's just assume the assumptions you're making are wrong because that really can't hurt anything. Another way you need to see clearly is to see yourself clearly. We just talked about how to see your employee clearly. How do you see yourself clearly? You need to ask, what is your dream outcome? What do you actually want to happen here? Like, honestly, do you want them to know, like, you're doing things wrong, right? Do you want them to know what you think, or do you want them to learn to ask better questions before making a decision, right? Is it about you or is it about them? And if you are being really honest with yourself, is the desired outcome or the win for you of the conversation primarily aimed at their success? I have majorly struggled with this, like big time, especially when it comes to people with behavior issues, right? If someone's like interrupting or dismissing other people's opinions, it drives me crazy. I want them to stop for the sake of the people that they're hurting or bothering. And sure, that hopefully would happen, but is it my motivation going in to care first for the person right in front of me and to give them feedback for their good? So when I'm giving feedback to a dancer, it isn't just because I don't want their technique to make the whole dance look bad. I want them to be a better dancer, the dancer that they have the potential to be. So name your goal clearly. My goal isn't to call them out. It's to build trust. It's to help them, or whatever your goal is. And the final thing to see clearly is just the feedback itself. Feedback is kind. especially when it's clear, when it's direct, but empathetic, when it's not too soft or not too tough all at the same time. And this balance is not mean, it's clear. So, Kim Scott, the author of the amazing book Radical Candor, tells a great story about a time when she was in New York City and she was walking her dog. And she loved this dog, adored this dog too much to ever tell it what to do or to speak harshly to it. She just loved it so much. She couldn't speak a harsh word. So she was walking her dog. They were near the side of a street and a taxi sped by really quickly. And thankfully, Kim was able to pull her dog back up onto the curb just in time to avoid her dog getting hit by a taxi. So a man was watching nearby and he had the nerve to say, "I can see that you just really love that dog." And she said, "Yeah, I really do." And he said, "But if you don't teach that dog to sit, you're going to kill that dog." And Kim was just shocked by what he said. He cared personally when he said, "I can see you really love that dog." But then he challenged directly when he said, "If you don't teach that dog to sit, you're going to kill that dog." And so that man went right up to the dog and with a firm voice said, "Sit." And the dog actually sat. And the man looked back up at Kim and he said, "It's not mean, it's clear." And he walked away. And that is the job of feedback. So see them clearly, not just through the story you're telling yourself. See yourself clearly by acknowledging what your goal is of giving the feedback, and see feedback itself clearly as something kind and good for the other person. And I encourage you to write those things down before you go into a feedback conversation. And to help you, I made a template with all of these prompts and really the whole framework for you in a fillable form so you can actually write or type this out for yourself. And of course, all it takes is doing it just a few times and you won't need to write it down anymore because it will just become the way you do it. So to get the fillable template, it's free for the whole framework. Just go to HeyCaraList, KARALIST.com/feedback, HeyCaraList.com/feedback, and download it today. Okay, so after we have seen clearly, we move on to the part you've been waiting for. I know what you're thinking. Cool, Kara, but how do I actually say the thing? What do I actually say? And I totally get it. So we're moving into that now with the second part of the framework, which is say the thing. Because if you're anything like me, you have prepared the whole talk and then you get there and you soften it or you sugarcoat it because it's just too hard. And you don't know what to expect or what to do if they react bad. So you end up just not saying what you prepared. Or the other way a lot of people handle it is they just say the thing. They blurt it all out real quick just to get it out of the way in one blunt blow of a conversation. And then they walk away totally regretting how they delivered it. So it's not just what we say, but how we say it. And if there's one most consistent way we can get this wrong, and I've already alluded to it, is we tend to make a claim on their character instead of just addressing the behavior. And when we do that by saying something like, "You were really rude when," or "Should we expect it to be on time or late, like is your usual?" We're making an attack or a claim on who they are, and that never goes well. It shuts everything down right there. It's over. So when we give feedback, we're going to stick to the facts, okay? And we're going to keep it clear, literally CLEAR, the acronym you can use for saying the thing. So the first letter C stands for context, which is basically setting the scene. You're going back to the time and place where the thing happened. So for example, in the past 3 weeks, or yesterday at the meeting, or in the email you sent on Tuesday to the client. So you're stating the context. That's the C. Then moving on to the L is lay out the behavior. So within the context, what is the behavior you observed? Example, in the past 3 weeks, I've sent several emails asking for your project updates. That's the context. And the layout of the behavior is, and I noticed you didn't respond until days later or sometimes not at all. You're just clearly stating the behavior. You're not making a claim on their character. You're not telling yourself any other story. You're just saying, here's the context, here's the behavior. So then the E in clear is the effect. You're going to describe the effect or the impact this behavior has had. So you could say, when you don't reply at all or till days later, it makes it really hard for the rest of the team to plan, and it puts extra pressure on the administrative team to scramble for solutions. So you're just saying it straight, right? Here's the context, here's the layout of the behavior that I've seen, and here's the impact of the behavior. And do you see how this isn't being mean? It is just being clear. Our behaviors are a cause and effect situation. This is just a part of life. And so you're helping them to see that this goes beyond them and their own work and actually has an impact, which is really why you're having the conversation at all. Now, the next part is the most important part of the whole conversation. And it's because feedback should not be a monologue. And up to this point, you've been doing all the talking. So, in order to learn what you don't know and to see where you might be wrong, to investigate what their side of the sphere looks like, at that point, you ask a question. So, the A in clear stands for ask a question. And again, this question isn't meant to lead them to an admittance of what you have said. Like, what do you have to say about that? That's not the kind of ask here. It's to learn what you don't know or how you can help. So in this scenario, after you've laid out the context, you've laid out the behavior, you've explained the effect, you might ask, what's going on? Or you might ask, how can I help? And then you just let them talk. And they don't need to defend themselves. They don't need to feel the need to give excuses. This is just their opportunity to talk, to share, to help you see from their side of the sphere. And I could give you examples of what they might say, but the truth is, it could be anything. And this part of the conversation is the back and forth. This is the dialogue. And you just keep asking questions, or you just say, tell me more. You get really curious. And by curious, I mean genuinely curious. So to be curious, you have to admit that you don't know and that you're willing to be surprised. Is it possible that you do know exactly what's happening? Totally. But are you willing to be surprised instead of proven right? So you ask a question and you have hopefully some good dialogue, and you get some clarity on what's keeping them from, in this scenario, replying to those emails. So now you move on to the R of clear, which is resolve. And that doesn't mean the whole situation is magically resolved. It just means that you resolve this conversation with a next step. So let's follow up on this next week, or maybe it's an actual action item. Like, you together have decided that they're going to put a calendar reminder to answer those emails for themselves, or whatever it is. You together collaboratively come up with a next step. And that next step leads to the next conversation, because feedback, it cannot be one conversation. It has to be ongoing. So you resolve this one in a way that leads you to the next. And that's how you say the thing with the clear method: context, lay out the behavior, effect, ask a question, resolved. Ta-da! Okay, so you nailed the mindset, right, with the see clearly part, and then you nailed the skill set with the say the thing part, and now you're going to commit to ongoing feedback and support with the stay connected part. And here are a few ways you can stay connected. Start and end each conversation warmly and with care. Now, don't hear me wrong. This is not the feedback sandwich. Absolutely not the feedback sandwich. Stop using the dreaded feedback sandwich. What I mean is to be genuine and thankful and warm as you start and end, regardless of what happens in the middle. So to stay connected, you also just have to give feedback regularly. Remember, if we want feedback to be something we do and not just something that we dread, we have to keep doing it. And not only with this kind of constructive feedback, but with praise. So you can use the clear method in the exact same way to give praise, to give positive feedback. Whether we like to admit it or not, we all need to be told that we're doing a good job and we're valuable. So especially in those chats where we're pushing for growth and pulling out some harder things, we have to reinforce what we see that is good and valuable. And finally, just keep the conversations going and keep up the dialogue, not monologue. So when we just talk at people, it becomes a power play and not a collaboration. So when you resolve the conversation, make sure you continue to chat about it. You could even bring it up the next day and stay connected by asking, hey, after having some time to think about it, is there anything else you want to talk about? And this just signals that you are open, you're here for them beyond that one hard conversation that is now just something checked off your task list. I know that all that I just said feels like a lot, but it's actually really simple. So here's the simple review. See clearly by having a clear goal and avoiding assumptions. Use the clear method to say the thing and then stay connected. And friend, I promise, if you can commit to using this framework for feedback, it won't take long before it comes easily and your team learns to not only expect it, but also to give it like this because you are modeling it. Okay, so this week, who do you need to have that conversation with? Is there a person? Is there a conversation that you're like, oh no, now I have to do the thing? So, will you lead with care and humility and challenge directly using this method? I hope you do. So, go ahead, download the template so you have the tools you need to prepare and do this well. Go to heycarolist.com/feedback. One more thing. These conversations have nuance. I get that. And even the tightest, most rehearsed and proven system doesn't always work with the complexities that we share as humans. And if you are struggling to know how to handle a very specific situation or conversation, or if you've tried and you need help, then set up a free call with me. I'm serious. This is what I do, friend. I'm here for you to help you figure out what to do. So go ahead to heycarolist.com/free call and let's set up a time for you to tell me what's going on. I'd be happy to help you work through it. Most leaders avoid hard conversations like the plague, but you are not most leaders. You are a leader of integrity who cares about the work and the people. And I promise you, these efforts will not go unseen and your commitment to your people will pay off. So keep doing the good work. And as always, I'm here 100% cheering you on. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.